Never sleep again.
Are you afraid of the things that go bump in the night? Do you feel like a zombie after a long night of tossing and turning? Well, then try Dream from LifeWise. Just one tab daily before bed will leave you feeling rested and refreshed every morning. That's right, Dream from LifeWise. Just one simple tab placed on your tongue, it dissolves and let you drift into dreamland. Text Moose Dream to 754-600-9473 to get you started with your free samples today. You're listening to Moose's Monster Mash. Welcome, Horror Hounds, to another all-new episode of Moose's Monster Mash. I'm your host, Moose, and speak it and it will come true. Last month we covered No Tears in Hell, and I said, who knows, maybe we can get, director Michael Caissie to come on the show, and guess what? This month's guest is writer, director, and producer Michael Caissie. How we doing, sir?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Paul. I'm
glad you're here. And so I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the episode, but
I did.
So you definitely have your you made your bones in horror, and I am curious as to how you got into filmmaking to begin with.
Yeah, that's a long-winded question, and I got a long-winded answer for it. It's a short-winded question, long-winded answer. Let me rephrase that. I started writing before anything else. So I was writing as a young kid, always writing. And I was a daydreamer. So I would be sitting there, doing house chores and just being in school, just always daydreaming. And I actually went to college in Massachusetts for business. And I was at a pretty decent college, and I was dating someone at the time who went to a liberal arts kind of creative college in the city, and I was just always at their place, at their parties. I just gravitated towards it. And the more electives I started taking, I also got into theater in high school, towards the end of high school, and I just kind of just vibed with it. I always was fascinated I've always been a fan of movies and TV. So that kind of was a natural progression. And I grew up reading Stephen King books, really at a way too young of an age. But the escapism. Yeah. I remember one time I went to the public library and I went to check out one of the books, and the librarian was like, "I think you're a little young for this." I'm like, "Well, you're about 4 or 5, books too late on that one, lady." But I appreciate your looking into it. But just the escapism, the ability to just be transported into another world was always captivating. And so, I would write short stories, I would write poems. I was in a band in high school for a little while. So just anything that was kind of an outlet, I felt like, to storytell or just be creative in general. One time when I was in college, I just was talking to the girl I was dating at the time, and she wanted to be an actress. And let's just, after sophomore year of college, let's just go out to LA and see if we can make it. And originally I came out to LA to act, and write was kind of like a secondary thing. Directing and producing came much later. I kind of knew I wanted to direct. I didn't even know what producing was at the time. But yeah, I came out, and I never took any kind of screenwriting courses or directing courses or any of that stuff. I just would read a lot of screenplays that were produced and started to write them. And I found pretty quickly that the audition process that I was much too ugly to be an actor, or let me put it this way, my look changed really drastically from young looking to hair fell out bald. And the process of auditioning to me was just kind of, I just didn't like it. I was just so much more comfortable writing. And then directing was a natural progression from that. Mainly after Hangman, with the Pacino, Carl Urban, Brittany Snow movie that I had co-written, had come out, I was already kind of going in that direction for directing. And that was my first kind of initiation into, when you write a movie, how many chefs can come in the kitchen and kind of just change your work, and the difference between a screenplay versus being like a playwright where, playwrights, especially over in Europe and stuff, are the word is the written word, and it's like nothing has ever changed. Screenplays are just so much different. Director comes on board, producers come on board, actors come on board, and everybody has kind of a say in the storytelling process. So after Hangman, I was like, I think it's time for me to get into directing, and producing was more of a necessity because getting my own work off the ground seemed to be the best avenue to not only get it up and financed, but also just to kind of keep as much of that creative control. I do like the collaborative process, but it's hard for me to let go of some of that control when you start from a blank page and then all of a sudden people come in at the 11th hour and they're just doing their thing. And some of the collaborative stuff is great, especially during production. I love being collaborative on set. It's just hard for me to, anyone who's worked for me will tell, I do have somewhat of a heavy hand in regards to what the final vision is, at least in my mind from the get-go. So that's kind of how I got into filmmaking. It was a progression from, I guess, novel reading and free writing and creative writing to theater to screenwriting to very short stint in acting to screenwriting career-wise, professionally, and then directing and producing kind of followed organically after that.
Now, looking at that journey, your parents had to be happy that you're going to college for business. This is a very, ironclad, well-proven track. You're going to go get a degree in business. You're going to go off, have a successful life. And then you take this hard left and say,
yeah,
I'm going to California for theater and movies and writing. How was that received?
That was it's interesting because my dad was very blue collar, a lifelong construction worker, had been working since he was like 14. In fact, when I was in college, I remember on the weekends, I would get up at like 3:30 a.m. and he would pick me up and we would go do construction when all of my school buddies would be either just coming home from partying or fast asleep and going to tailgate at football games and stuff. So I had a very different kind of upbringing on that front. My mom was an accountant for the most part. So I had I guess I would say both parents were, I guess, supportive. I had my grandparents were really close to me on my mom's side, and my grandfather would always tell me, keep a day job, keep a day job, keep a day job. Don't quit until you're 100% sure. And I tried to stick with that out here. That was one of the reasons I think it took me as long as it did to kind of get a foothold into this career, was because I would do a day job and then turn it into a career. So I would start something and just say, oh, this is going to be pay the bills. And the way I was raised, I just like to kind of work my way up. And next thing I know, I'm making a good salary and have a good health benefits and all that stuff. And it becomes very hard to keep the creative side right on the days off. So at some point, I just said I have to take this leap of faith, because I was running restaurants at one point and making good money, but I was working like 90 hours a week. I had a young child at that time, and it was just like, if I'm going to do it, and again, Hangman had just, I think it just had been bought. I don't even think it had been made yet. And I was like, this is the time to do it. So I've had a couple of scary months, days, years. Even today, even to this day, it's not, everyone thinks that Hollywood is this really rich. Well, it's not that way. It's still a hustle. So luckily I have that background of just working hard and keeping my head down and pushing forward. But yeah, to answer your question, I did get some pushback, more so once you get into relationships, you start a family. On the other side of that is like, maybe you should go into this and
family
this.
first.
Yeah, just take care of your responsibilities, which is 100% valid. It's just really hard to I'm like right at that precipice where it's like I'm so close and I know it's already to like just go to the next thing. So, but it's also like still so scary. So it's like, ugh, what do you do? And so, yeah, I didn't get much pushback, but I also was pretty independent, and particularly from my parents from a relatively young age, just by family dynamic and some stuff that had gone down. So I kind of was a little bit, I had that freedom, whether they were going to let me do it or not, I was going to do it.
Damn it, this is my life. This is my goal.
Yeah. And it's, I started working at a young age like my father had. And so, even in college, I had a painting company and I was making good money. And so it was like, I always thought, my brother and I talk about this a lot. It's like, go chase the dream, and worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you're just going back to whatever that 9 to 5 would be, or so it's better to chase it now than not chase it and realize that after the fact, when it's too late, that I didn't get the chance to do what I wanted to do. So that's kind of where my head's always been at in terms of being a dreamer.
Nice. Now, when we were talking about your journey into filmmaking and everything, you mentioned you don't mind collaborating, but you do have trouble giving up creative control. How does that work when you're working on like a TV series where you're a writer in like a pool of writers like Purgatory or Second Chances?
So those two, it's a little bit different because both of those were like speculative TV shows, meaning they weren't with like a network. So we didn't have like a showrunner. Like if I was working on, say, like Sons of Anarchy, which I'm a big fan of, Kurt Sutter is the creator, he's the showrunner. So he hires the writers and you follow Kurt Sutter's kind of writing patterns, and everything he wants is the way it goes. With Purgatory, which came before Second Chances, that was an Armenian TV show that I was hired to kind of Americanize and tweak. And then we went back to Armenia and used some of the same cast, some of the same crew, and we just kind of did the American version of it, brought in some actors from the US, some actors from the UK, some of the actors were local. And so that was a unique experience because I had a co-director named Hayek who was fantastic, but I had ultimately somewhat of a creative free platform. So Hayek and I collaborated as co-directors. But as far as the writing was concerned, there was the structure from the original writer in terms of the characters and stuff. But even that, we just kind of took in our own direction. And then Second Chances, I came in for seasons 2 and 3. There was already a season 1. So I was kind of in a box a little bit in terms of some storylines and some characters. But I knew the directors from the first season. I also knew the executive producers because I had worked with them before. So that was a very different experience. After Second Chances was done, I wrote and directed 20 of the 30 episodes. I didn't have anything to do with post. So the executive producers went and did all the editing and all of that stuff without me. So when I was watching the show for the first time, I was watching it just like everybody else. So I didn't know what was used and what wasn't used. So that was a little bit of a letting go, if you will. So those were two very different experiences. But to your point, traditionally, if I was on like a network show, yeah, directors are just hired guns. You come in, you do your job. The executive producers, the showrunners are the bosses. And that's something that mentally, I think that is something I have to look at because I have been such a control freak in my career. But I'm seeing it, a little bit here and there with films and feature films where sometimes I step on producers' toes and put my foot in my mouth a little too much and feel bad about it after the fact. It comes from a good place, though. Honestly, it's passion and it's authenticity. It's not fabricated, and I'm not trying to be a dick by any stretch. Just care about the story.
Well, I mean, that's human nature. I mean, you put your time into it, and you want to see it to fruition.
Yeah, and it's also any part of filmmaking process, and I think even like if I'm talking to a young actor, it's like you got to remember that an actor will come on the set, for example, they might be on the set for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, a couple of days. I'm going to live with whatever this film is that we're filming for the next 6 months to a year to 2 years, whatever it may be. No Tears was years of my life trying to get that finished. So it's like there is a level of, I don't want to say actors aren't committed. That's not what I'm saying here at all. It's just my level of like passion it's just so dialed in because I've lived with this from when it was nothing, a blank page on an iPad, to all the way to the end when it's being released and people are looking at it. So it's like I just have put so much of my life and my blood, sweat, and tears into it. It's hard for me not to care. I don't know what that would be like. How do you shut that off? I think that would be counterproductive.
Like it's a curse of being creative. I mean, like I said, you spend so much time pouring your energy into this, and it's one of those where it's like, this is what I see. And this is why, when you're doing your own thing, start to finish, you're like, okay, I see this. This is exactly how I see it play out. And if you see it change a little bit, that's where you shift it. But yeah, I could definitely see where it'd be hard to be like, no, that's not my vision. Stop. But you have to kind of sit back and be like, nope, this is their project. I'm just kind of helping out.
There's a lot of that. And there's, negotiating wise in terms of like the deals, it's like who gets final cut, who gets final say. I'm experiencing that with the feature I just finished where, I don't have final cut. So luckily I'm working with some great producers. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we butted heads quite a few times. But I realized that if they want to do a different cut or they want to do something slightly different, I don't necessarily have the ability. I have the input. Contractually, I can put input and say this is what I'm thinking. But if they want to go in a totally different direction, that's their prerogative per contract and per where they are in their career versus where I am. So it's a very humbling experience, and I've been fortunate to surround myself and be in bed, so to speak, with some great producers and executive producers in all the projects I've done that are collaborative, but also creative, but also get it too. Because part of it is it's that fine line, and especially when producing some of my own stuff, it's like budget versus creativity is a big thing too. Like time is always like the biggest money suck, if you will. So it's like, how do you walk that? And that's one of the things I do pride myself on is I figured out between working on Purgatory and producing my own stuff, how to do stuff effectively and quickly. That sometimes I think a lot of younger filmmakers get stuck and they want to make something perfect, and it's like it just doesn't. If I have 60 days to shoot something and it's a huge Hollywood movie and I can shoot one page a day, cool, yeah, I can make this the perfect thing. But if I'm trying to shoot a whole movie in 12 days, 15 days, or whatever it is, there's a structure and a kind of a balancing act, if you will. And I think that's something that I've done pretty well, I think. So that's kind of a, but again, it's how do you find that? How do you keep your vision and then also realize that there's not an endless amount of time to do stuff too? That's another factor, if you will.
And I mean, let's look at some of your projects, a lot of which are honestly tearing up Tubi right now, which is great.
Yeah,
it means everybody can watch them.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about that. I didn't even realize. Like, I'm like, oh my God, I got a bunch of projects on Tubi, which is great.
Now this one, you're writer and director on, and beautiful poster of it behind you, Hunter's Moon.
Yeah.
So that was one where you had full control, start to finish. Was that where did that start from?
That was the first project after Hangman, where one of the main producers on Hangman is a man named Arnold Rifkin, been in the business forever, and he was like, "Do you still want to direct? I have a money person that's looking for films that we can do in the $2 million range." And I had written the script. Originally, Hunter's Moon was called The Orchard, and I had this script, and Arnold knew about it, and we went to this financier, and she had kept trying to attach certain talent to get to the certain get a name attached to do the movie and justify the financing. And this had gone on, I want to say like a year or something like that, to the point where I kind of went to Arnold and said, I think I'm going to try and take this a different direction and see if we can't go find the money elsewhere and kind of just take a little bit more rather than just have this financier. And so we kind of parted ways, and I met up with my current and producing partner, Clayton Turnage, who's done a bunch of stuff, Purgatory, Hunter's Moon with me, just did Rough Draft with me. He's done some second chances he did with me. Brought him on board, and we came on. We were like, we're going to shoot this in Kentucky. We put the cast together, and we did our pre-production in Kentucky. We got some private equity. We shot the movie. We started to shoot the movie, and we had a Me Too situation, not on set, but we had a cast member who's no longer with us on this planet, has passed away since then. But something had come out from years earlier. And Hunter's Moon, it's a predominantly female cast. For all intents and purposes, it's a female empowerment movie wrapped in a home invasion / werewolf. And one of my main investors was a female. And so we made the decision. We talked to a couple of different distributors, and we were like, if we keep this path going and we keep this guy on, can we sell this movie? And we just got a lot of bad feedback. Like, no, it's going to be a problem. We talked to the cast, and so we finally made the uncomfortable situation. I told this actor, I said, look, what I think is irrelevant, really, it's really the perception. And so we had to cut bait. So we had to fire that actor. And then because of that, we had to recast and reshoot. And that took almost 2 years from when we had started. And a lot of the stuff that we had shot was now unusable because someone had used that actor. So 2 years later, we got some more financing. Thomas Jane was cast at that point, and we shot the bulk of that movie in Los Angeles over the course of 8 days. So we took this little bit we could that used from Kentucky and meshed it with the stuff in LA in 2 different locations, 2 different houses. The front of the house is like a house in Los Angeles. The sides and the back are this historic house in Kentucky in the middle of nowhere. So we kind of married those worlds together, and we took what we could in Kentucky. There were some shots that I'm so still to this day depressed. Really cool visual shots in the back with this barn and stuff that I couldn't use. So that movie was finished, but we basically got a tax incentive from the state of Kentucky, and we had a distribution deal through Grindstone and Lionsgate, and then we had the foreign sales lined up too. So we basically loaned against that all those pieces of paper, if you will, to finish the movie. So that was a labor of love, because then I also did all the legal delivery, which was all this stuff that I was not qualified, nor had I ever done. It's basically putting together a lot of just different documents. So we had a lawyer, so it wasn't like I did the legal contracts. I wasn't doing that. It was just putting all the requirements for Lionsgate to put together, and that was worse than making a movie in terms of like headaches. It went on forever. But by the end of the day, like I watched that movie, and I took a lot of. I mean, you can never really. I say this. This is something I've said quite a bit. Where every movie you see doesn't get to have this asterisk next to it, where the filmmaker gets to explain to you, like, well, all of this shit happened, and this is why this is this, and this is why this is this. And one thing I didn't have control over was Grindstone changed the name to Hunter's Moon, and then they really pushed the werewolf angle, and it's shot to be like Jaws, where we did get this awesome werewolf that was made by this Vincent Castani. It's fantastic makeup monster creator guy. And him and his team made this fantastic werewolf. There was a stunt guy named Lucky who was on stilts that made him 9 feet tall. So we put all this stuff in, but I did the Jaws thing on purpose, where I wanted to just see flashes and not see anything, and then just have this one scene where the werewolf was very apparent, and that's the visual there. But if you market it as this big werewolf movie, and it's not a werewolf movie, it's a character piece wrapped around with werewolf elements, and that's some cool twist to it. But like I got dragged in the reviews, and even Vincent was like, you're going to get killed by the fanboys because they're going to say this is a werewolf movie and you didn't barely show the werewolf that I made for you. And I said, no, the fanboys will get it. Yeah, I got dragged. So, and it's unfortunate. Now I watch it and I have a lot of love for it. I think it's one of those things where it was kind of my film school, if you will. I learned, if had I known now and go back and film that, I would have done it for, half the budget, half the headaches, would have been a lot different. But I learned quite a bit, and met Clay in the process. And I met Daniel R. Hill, who's in the movie. He's blowing up as an actor. And so I met a lot of great people involved, and some of them, one of the DPs on the project, Gav, I still work with, he did No Tears with me. So it's like weird how you meet these people and things happen in your life career-wise. I mean, regular life is like this too, where you just happen to run into somebody. Even if the guy who wrote Hangman with me is one of my best friends. I met him because I worked security in Warner Brothers for all of 3 days. And I just happened to meet him in that 3-day period. And we've been like lifelong friends ever since. Had we not run into each other over that 3-day period, we never would have met each other. And so it's just kind of weird how things happen like that.
Well, timing's everything.
Yeah. So, but to your point, as far as the cut, they didn't give me any notes. I didn't have to change that. But it was a real labor of love, where there's a lot of things in there where it was very challenging and things beyond our control. But I still appreciate the film.
And then 2023, you wrote one of the most publicized movies, The Island. I mean, this movie was everywhere.
Oh, the Michael Jai White. Yeah. Was that one of those where they're like, hey, we have this movie idea, we're looking for a writer, and this is kind of what we're looking for? Or what's the process for something like that? Yeah, that's almost exactly how it happened. I have a great rep now named Jeff Goldberg, and at the time I didn't have a rep. I was I'm trying to think if my kids are going to listen to this. Well, it's out there. I mean, at the time I was separated, getting to the beginnings of a divorce. I was on the East Coast, kind of licking my wounds, if you will, and I knew Jeff. I tried as a producer. I tried to get one of Jeff's clients, Casper Van Dien, on another project that I was trying to put together as a producer. And Jeff called me and he said, "I don't know if you're interested in this, but I need a writer. This producer needs a writer that can write a script in 5 to 7 days while collaborating with the producer. Is that something you could do?" And for reference, that's an incredibly fast pace. But I had done it before. It's actually one of the things. To me, it's doable, but it's a lot of people would say, "No way." Not a whole lot of money, but it's blah, blah, blah. They're on this island. They're going to shoot this movie. It's his idea. It's this producer. So I said, yeah, why not? I'll do it. I'm just sitting at a buddy's house on the East Coast and drinking too much and smoking too many cigarettes and just sitting around trying to figure out what to do with my life. So it worked the way it worked with the time difference, because I don't know exactly where the island is, but I would write 15 pages, and then Philippe is the main producer. I would send the pages to Philippe, and then I would fall asleep. I'd go to sleep, and Philippe would read them, and then the next morning it would be like his night and my morning or something like that. we would talk for about an hour. We would go over the 15 pages. He would do some tweaks, and then I would go and I'd do the next 15 pages. And so we did that for about 7 days. The director that was attached, named Sean, he's repped by my rep. Ended up meeting him later, but Michael Joy White, I think, signed on, I think, a day or two after we finished the script. So it all happened relatively quick. It was already financed. They already had the crew set up. So we wrote the script together, and then I think they were filming in a couple of weeks, which is like unheard of. Like that just doesn't happen. So they had already kind of started prepping stuff, and it was really kind of exciting to see how quickly it happened. And yeah, Michael signed on, and a couple other of the cast members, and just kind of all the credit goes to Sean and Philippe and that team putting together the movie. And it's a fun movie. I mean, it's not it's unique. It's an action film, and it's kind of like very similar to the 90s action movies that I grew up loving. My brother and I would watch like Van Damme movies and stuff like that. So kind of has it's like paying homage to that a little bit, where it's it's just get in and get out, and Michael does a great job. And Kimmy Stone is an actress in that film that I ended up working with on Second Chances afterwards. So again, trying to all the pieces, you meet people from certain things, and then you get the chance to kind of collaborate after the fact. So that was a exciting experience. And and The Island took off. That was like number one on Stars for a long time. And
yes, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And considering where where you were in your life, that had to be a nice. It's like I did that.
No, it's cool. It's always an actress/producer that I'm about to work with sent me like a Deadline article that was announcing like their next film. It never, and I guess this is an ego thing, but it never gets old to see. I'm still like that young kid that was like daydreaming. And so like still it's just the fact that I get to write and make movies, whether it's as a writer or a writer-director or a writer-director-producer, just the fact that I get to do what I dreamed of doing and just tell these stories and just be a part of that is still kind of surreal to me. Like sometimes I have to remind myself, especially if I'm feeling frustrated, it's like, no, this is your dream. Like 20-year-old me, because I'm 46, about to be 47, 20-year-old me would think that I've made it. Like this is the most amazing thing ever. And it's like, you're still wired, especially in this industry, to just continually push and like, okay, I'm done with this. What's next? But I have been really kind of focused on like just taking in and realizing it's a miracle now, especially these days, even to get a movie made, it's getting harder and harder to do that, especially in the independent world. But to have that and then have people watch it and get excited for it, it's just really cool.
Well, that's awesome. As you've proven, each one's a building block to the next one. You meet new people, it's all networking, and it's, that opens the doors to the next project. And, could be a bigger project, could be a smaller project. You don't know what's going to be behind that door.
Yes.
But it's, from what I've learned doing this, filmmaking is just a really long, it's that dream that you have as a kid, well, I guess it's usually more of a nightmare where you're just walking down that hallway of doors. But this time you actually can open the doors.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to be back there. I mean, like look at The Island. Such a short deadline. There was no way to tell that movie was going to take off like it did.
No idea.
And, like you said, small pay, fast turnaround, a lot of pressure. You could have just said, screw it. No, I don't need that kind of a headache.
Yeah.
And then sit back and watch this thing blow up when somebody else does it, and you're sitting there kicking yourself in the ass. So it's funny how life works.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. If you don't take the chances, I mean, that's the thing. It's I will say it's harder when you direct, because as a writer, there is like that shield of like, okay, I wrote the script and then some other director went and took it. So like I lose a little bit of control. So like as a director, I feel like there is more pressure. It's much like if you're an actor, your face is on screen. That's your moneymaker, if you will. So it's hard to hide if you're an actor and you have a bad performance because you're on screen. Even though when you do the performance, there's so much that's left to the editing and the director that's out of your control. But as a writer, I feel I'm able to take more risks to some extent because, I'm just kind of giving like the skeletal structure of what's going to become a film or a TV show, if you will. So that's also like, I mean, writing to me is like, I honestly, this is a cliche thing to say, but if I couldn't write, I think I would die. Like it's something I actually need to do. Like it's just So to me, it's almost second nature. And it's like, there's an excitement when I start any, people talk about, oh, it's like pressure. To me, it's like awesome. It's like a blank screen. And then what am I going to do? And then where does it go from there? And, I've also done a lot of ghost jobs too, where someone hires me to rewrite something that's already been made, already been written without credit. And then, that movie goes and gets made, or, fix a script. And I've been hired to rewrite scripts or fix dialogue and stuff that's been made countless times too, where, I'll see it and go, oh, yeah, that's the thing I did, or that's the thing I contributed to that no one will know outside of a small handful of people that, hired me to do it. And even then inside internally, there's movies that are out now or about to come out where certain people involved with the project knew that I did some tweaking and some other people had no idea and would be mad if they knew. And so it's this really weird thing where it's like, okay, you're going to help, but don't tell this person. I'm like, oh my God, this is so like middle school. Whatever I got to do it to help out, because it's all about the project at the end of the day. So yeah, it's cool. It's just to have like, someone say like, hey, can you, like, we want to hire you, or like, that's a pretty cool thing, because it hasn't always been the case. When I started, I was just writing scripts, probably showing them to people that were in places of power way too early before they were any good. And that was probably a mistake that in hindsight, I wish I'd tweaked a little bit, but that's ultimately now I got people, calling my rep saying like, hey, can we get Michael to do a polish on this? Or, even this actress producer I was just talking about, she reached out to me because of No Tears. And she said, hey, I'm looking for a director for this movie. No Tears looks awesome. Like, what are you doing? I said, send me the script. So it's like one of those things where now I'm going like, okay, it's starting to pay dividends in the sense that like I get to continue to do, versus there's a lot of ups and downs in the business, but like I still feel like as long as people are realizing that, like I'm finally getting to a place where I know I can do, like writing, I always kind of, modesty aside, I always knew I could write. Finding the craft of screenwriting took a little bit of time, but creatively writing was always something that kind of came natural. Directing and producing was something where it was like, yeah, I think I can do this, but you never know. And so it's kind of a leap of faith. And now I'm kind of going, yeah, I can do this. Not only can I do this, but I enjoy doing this, because the writing is very solitary. Even if you're writing with somebody else, you get on set to film something as a director and or producer, it's a different energy. Like it's like a high. I imagine it's like being a rock star and going on stage and just having that kind of energy. And it's just kind of a cool thing, because after you're done filming, there's always a crash, like a letdown, where you're just sitting there. You're like, all right, now what? Now that now we're back to square one and trying to keep doing that. And there's other parts of filmmaking like post and stuff that keep you going. But that being on set and having all those moving pieces is just so dynamic. It's awesome.
Well, and let's dive into your newest project. And honestly, probably the only film I've watched in a while that made me feel like I needed to go take a shower after watching it. No Tears in Hell. I said in my review it was dirty and grimy and gross, but in a good way, and I mean it. Like it's definitely the story that it has to be just grungy. There's no way to tell that story. Like I guess you could have told that story polished up, like a lot of the serial killer stories are these days.
Yeah.
But, I said it in the last episode. This felt very much like, you're essentially reading it through Alex's like journal, and you have to put the pieces together. And it was just grimy and raw. And now I've heard you say in another interview that the story came from, you got the original story from the co-writer Alexander. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I don't even want to try.
I'll be honest, I don't say his last name for the same reason, because I just don't want to butcher it. I feel bad because he's such a great guy. But yeah, he it's like credits get weird because the story by credit is for him. So he basically was like, hey, I want to do a movie about the serial killer. Here's a bunch of information. Go write the script. So that was like, have at it, and gave me no notes. And the whole process, I mean, No Tears in Hell, I got no notes from anybody. So like, that's like every single, I see some of the reviews that are like, oh, the pacing is a little slow, totally done intentionally. But I will see the distributor, who's a friend, wanted to do some recuts. And he was like, was like, no, I want it to be this way, man. And he's like, okay, but the next one that we distribute for you, you gotta at least let me give you some feedback. I said, like, all right, I'll get you on the next one, but this is like very meticulously how I want this film to be.
This one had to be paced slow. I mean,
Yeah.
looking into the killer's history,
Mhm.
it seemed like he was a very methodical and just, he paced everything out. So you couldn't, if you rushed the film, it wouldn't feel right.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, because like I got dragged in one review for like glamorizing or like glorifying violence on women, and it noted that like, oh, the guys are killed quickly and the women are. I'm just taking the story for what happened. I mean, this guy didn't chain men to the radiator because he's not into dudes. I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
he tortured, he tortured women.
That was his thing, and full disclosure, he, according from everything I read, he would rape the women before killing them, and I just couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to do a movie with all this rapes and stuff like that. So there's, I swapped out rape for something else, obviously, which you saw. So that was if the real killer ever comes knocking on my door, he might take offense to that. But it was like, I just can't film this film and just have all these screaming rape. Personally, I just couldn't do it. As horrific as the film is, I'm not trying to say it's this innocent film.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a horrific film, but I'll go back to it. I've said it in my review. The choices, the changes you made from the original story to what you put on film don't change his story enough to where it's false, but it changes the story enough to take this already grotesque story and make it palatable. I mean, he was killing kids.
That's the other change, obviously. I'm not casting a bunch of kids.
Right.
I'm not going to do it. I have young kids. I mean, it was incredibly hard to write, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just looking into it, it was brutal.
Yeah. And some of the ways that he did kill, I did, obviously, I took some creative liberties with the bag and the lobotomy and stuff like that. That is, I wasn't in the room, thankfully, so none of us were. So I don't have autopsy reports and things like that. So there is a narrative that I obviously had to kind of bring in. And, I kind of tapped into people who know me that have worked with me. I tend to have a couple of fears that make their way into a lot of my films. Plastic bags over the head are in like almost all my films or TV shows in some capacity. I don't know what it is. That so freaks me the hell out. I
think it's because the era we grew up in, that was in every film.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, and that
was the constant.
Yeah, that's like this fear of like that happening to me is like a big thing. So there's that part of it, and obviously the voiceover stuff and the journaling and things like that is I think there is a quote at the end of the movie when he's talking about the wolf and the smiling and stuff. That's his quote. That's real. But all the other narrative and stuff where he's talking about other cannibals and things like that, that's a creative narrative that I put together because I was like, how do I tell this story and just not have it be, I wanted to kind of elevate it, make it a little bit different. There's a film called Snowtown out of Australia that I was really impressed with years ago. And there's a scene in a bathtub in that movie that stuck with me forever. And so when I was talking to the DP for this one, I said, watch Snowtown. It's similar in pacing too. I tend to gravitate towards Australian films, I think, and European films in general, more so almost than Americans in terms of, I don't know, storytelling, pacing, for whatever reason.
They're more artful and more artistic.
I think it's almost, I don't want to say Sundance, but like that kind of like, it's less commercial. It's less, and I don't ever go into a film saying like, oh, I want this to be so artful that no one sees it. That's not what I'm saying, but it's like, there's a level of sophistication of Snowtown, which was also based on a true story. And I think that director DP combo is fantastic. And their names escape me every single time. Sorry. I think the first name of the director is Justin. But yeah, I think that kind of was, and everything that you said in your in your last episode, everything you're saying now is exactly the vibe that I wanted. I wanted people to be uncomfortable, and it's not to glorify this guy by any stretch. I think if, again, when I was writing this, just writing the screenplay I had to keep taking breaks because I was like, oh my God, this is just so horrific. And if I can pull this off, and at that point, I wasn't even sure I was going to direct it. And, when it was offered to me to direct, I thought, God, this seems so terrible. I don't know if I should do this. And then I was like, that's exactly why I should do this, because it's so terrifying. And I was like, God, and I went in knowing, having directed before, there's always this, like, maybe other filmmakers can relate to this. There's always, especially when there's violence involved or sex or something, there's always this like moment where you feel uncomfortable and you're like, all right, I should say cut. And on this one, I specifically told the actors and the crew, I said, there's going to come this moment where all of us watching it monitor, and myself included, are going to be so uncomfortable, and I'm going to want to say cut, but I'm not going to say cut. I'm going to let it go a little further. And it's going to be hard, but this is when I told the actors this, there was no surprises. And I think that's one of the reasons that it works too, because it takes you to that level and that threshold.
It just pushes you just past it.
Yeah, and as the director, I'm uncomfortable watching this, and it's fake, and I've written it. I know what's happening. I know these actors. I've had conversations with them. We're going to say cut. We're going to have conversations afterwards. There is also this like enormous weight of like, this is based on a true story. These were victims. Like this is something that really happened to some extent. So there's all of this energy that's kind of wrapped into this filmmaking process, and it just becomes like this almost. And thank God, like the cast and crew were so amazing, professional. That in between takes, we did have these levels of humanity. There's like one outtake. I don't know if you've seen it. I'll send it to you. Where between Luke Baines and Tatiana with the tongue situation, and it's an outtake with the two of them laughing. But we had like those moments, and you kind of had to. And then like on days off, a lot of the cast went like whitewater rafting, and so it was like kind of this balancing act of this really serious kind of hard movie to make. And there was a lot of emotions where people on the crew were just like, I can't even. It's I can't. That's why I was like, I think by day 2 of filming, I was like, I think we really have something here. I kind of got this vibe where I hadn't had that feeling, I don't think ever before, where it was like, this is something. Like we're doing something, I don't want to say important, that might not be the right word, but memorable. Yeah, I've always thought too, when I saw the final cut of the film, nobody's going to watch this movie and be indifferent to it. No one's going to go, whatever. Like, I feel like it's going to have some kind of reaction from people, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing.
Well, and as reactionary as it is, it's still rewatchable, because there's going to be stuff you missed because you turned away, or you maybe you closed your eyes, and it's almost real-time horror.
Yes.
It's almost as if you were watching all of this play out in real time, and you as the viewer are reacting as you would if you essentially stumbled across some guy cutting somebody up in their bathtub.
Yeah.
You're in your mind, you're like, God, stop him. No, you're going to stand there just stonewalled and just frozen, not necessarily with fear, but with this just utter sense of, how is this happening right in front of me? And that's this whole movie. How is this happening right in front of me?
That's a good way. It's got a very, we try to do like a fly on the wall kind of thing. And I think I keep going back to that movie Snowtown, that scene in the tub in that movie. I kind of told the DP, when you watch this scene, I want to take that and stretch it through a whole movie, like basically. And that's kind of like what we tried to accomplish. And, you got to build up the characters, and it is such a short period of time to kind of get to know these younger cast members, if you will. But the ultimately thing was like, how do we do exactly what you're talking about? Like, how do you kind of stumble upon, like, you're kind of seeing things a little bit from the killer's perspective, but then you're also a viewer, almost like a voyeuristic kind of uncomfortable, I shouldn't be watching this, but I'm watching it. And there's this like you said, you want to take a shower. I mean, I want to take a shower after writing it. I want to take a shower after making it. I've seen it a bunch of times. I mean, post was probably like one of the hardest posts, because I'm like, how many times do I have to keep seeing this? And it was like, I watched it for the first time with someone who hadn't seen it maybe a month ago. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, now I remember this. And it was like kind of almost seeing it for the first time again. So it's, it's, again, it's the, there's a dark side of like humanity that for whatever reason, we gravitate towards serial killers in the sense that like, we don't want to do what they're doing and we don't condone it. But there's certainly a
So
reason
we're
that
absolutely fascinated by it.
100%. And watching it from the safety of your couch or theater or whatever, there is this level of voyeuristic kind of desire to like delve into what makes them tick. There's so many shows and so many movies and so many books. I that same library where the librarian told me I was too young to read the Stephen King book. Years later, I worked there as a page, and I remember putting books away and then just finding the serial killer just by happenstance, just finding the serial killer stuff and just for hours just started to read all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, why am I interested in this? It's like I'm like a nice guy. I'm never going to hurt anybody. But there's just this fascination of like, how does someone go there? What makes that person get there? And how do they exist? And the movie somewhat poses this question of like, are they born that way or are they made? I tried to get into that a little bit without beating someone over the head with it, in the sense of trying to put some pieces together with his backstory. And there really wasn't a lot in terms of like research to find what might have made him be this way. So I did get into that a little bit to kind of give him. I didn't want him to be this caricature of a killer. I wanted to, make him three-dimensional in the sense that, at some point he was a little boy. I do find that part interesting. Like,
yeah, and if listeners, if you're listening to this episode, I'd imagine you've finished the last episode and have preferably now watched No Tears in Hell. So, I went into Alexander, the killer's history. Yeah, what a life.
Yeah.
I mean, he, kind of abused at a young age, and then he starts his torturing spree at, late teens, goes into a mental facility, gets released, and then starts all this. It's like, and now he's still in a mental institution and will be there for the rest of his life. Like, it's interesting because, like, over here, it'd be life in prison.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's clearly something wrong with him, but no, I don't think you can do that without having something slightly off. So he's now, in a home for the mentally ill, and that I found surprising, that it's not prison, it's not even like a minimum security jail, it's, a mental hospital for the rest of his life. That was that was bonkers.
Because mom went to jail too. So
yeah, say mom went to jail. He goes to the padded room, and it was a weird family.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't. I said it in the episode. I said it to when I've talked to some of my friends. I don't know how to describe those two. I mean, it was just a weird mother-son relation. Like, it's not even Oedipal. It's just a weird mother-son relationship.
Yeah.
Like, there was so much was screwed up with this family that this outcome was inevitable. Like, I think if somebody could have spotted it at an early age, they could have, said, oh, he's going to be problems. And that's obviously it's hindsight, but good Lord.
I think that's the good Lord part that you just said. It's like he was definitely probably positioned by the timeline of where society was, particularly in that area at that time, versus the childhood versus all this. He was probably destined towards some kind of, not a good life, not in some kind of darkness, but to the level of, that's where the good Lord comes in. Like when you said good Lord, I don't know, you couldn't write the levels of depravity and
no.
Like it doesn't, if I just came up with this movie out of nowhere, like people would go, oh, it's so dark, and that wouldn't happen. But the fact that that's the thing that's the kicker. It's like there's plenty of people that have been, abused as children. There's plenty of people that have had like these twisted childhoods. They don't all turn out to be serial killers. They don't turn out to be serial killers to that extent as well. I mean, like reading the reports of like when finally went to the apartment, and how, the condition of the apartment with there's like bones in the living room and just kind of crazy shit like that. Like there's just, there's just that Ed Gaines, is it Gaines or Gaines, the Charlie Hunnam Monsters TV show that's coming out on Netflix. I'm curious to see how kind of tackle, because his story is probably closest to something like this in terms of like he had the mother dynamic too, and that kind of influenced Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I am curious to see what they do. There's also like there's another, it's the clown guy out of Chicago. I think there's a movie coming out as well. So again, going back to like this fascination with serial killers. But yeah, Ed Gein seems to be the only one that I can think of that kind of has this, like, it's just, I try to capture that in the movie too. Whenever you think like we've gone so far, this is so dark, take it to the next level, and just kind of, because I think that's, as you unpack his story, that's how it is. It's like you said, when he was 18, he put his girlfriend on that radiator and abused her, and then went to an asylum and then got out. And then, they could have caught him a lot sooner. And one of the things when I've watched these documentaries and stuff, whether it's, the Night Stalker and all these other, these ones in the UK and stuff, a lot of times the disconnect between authorities and stuff, especially at that time in Russia, like they recognized him as a possible suspect, I guess, but the file said that he was still in the asylum. So they're like, well, it matches him at his MO, but this is not him. He's locked up. Well, he wasn't locked up. He'd been released like, years earlier, but there's just this is pre, internet, pre all of that stuff, early 90s.
Well, it was the same thing with, Bundy had a similar issue was, it can't be Bundy because he's over here, but that goes back to not that specifically, but we've had these films in the last few years of Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, all these guys, and they're safe. The Menendez brothers, they're these, you get a look at what happened and you see, okay, X, Y, and Z. This is who they were. This is why they became what they were. And this is what they did. Now you move that to No Tears in Hell. You get the same X, Y, and Z, but the safety bumpers are off. It's, you're not going to see this movie on Netflix. I can guarantee it. It would be great because you could get it out in front of a lot of people, but it's definitely not super consumer friendly. Like it's going to turn a lot of stomachs, and all those other movies I just listed, while yes, they were uncomfortable, they weren't uncomfortable.
Right.
And that's what I really loved about this one, was it was so different. And it wasn't your standard true crime movie. And it wasn't okay, we're going to talk about the like, it was very much that, like you said, the fly on the wall, and we're watching this unfold, and you're helpless to do anything to, it's like you're there and you can't help these girls.
Right.
And how do you as a person feel and react to that? You feel like shit. That's how you feel.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, as a movie, that makes you feel amazing, because movies don't make you feel that way anymore.
Well, I appreciate all that. I think you hit it on the head. That's ultimately what I think collectively we were trying to do as filmmakers is, I wanted to make this, to your point, it is hard to commercialize this. And, right now, like, we're pushing a part of like the press I've been doing is to get people, whether they rent it or buy it on Amazon, to leave a review on Amazon and review it, because that helps their algorithms and things like that. So when people go on Amazon, it'll get the recommendation. And if you like this, you'll like this. And so sometimes smaller movies like this, they get distributed and then they get lost, and then it becomes word of mouth. Ultimately, I would love this to be a word of the mouth film, kind of where people start to, you can have a long life in terms of people just start talking about it. And, I would love to see it get on end of the year lists of like, craziest horror movies, whatever that may be. It's not why I made the movie, obviously, but in order for it to have the longevity that I think it deserves, it's gonna have kind of a grassroots type situation because it's not going to be for everybody. I mean, I was calling and texting family members and flat out just telling them straight out, like, this is a hard watch. Like, I don't know if you should, Auntie, I don't know if you should watch this. And to their credit, a lot of them still did. And I was very appreciative of that. But it's like, but yeah, for someone that wants something different, there's no glossiness to this. And that was done intentionally because to your point, I've seen so many movies that it's like, yeah, I didn't want this to be this shiny. I wanted it to be beautifully shot. So there's some of that there. Obviously, it's not ugly shot. It's just I want it to be dreary and dark and just kind of I want that claustrophobic feeling, and I want people to kind of not be able to catch their breath in the sense that like it's uncomfortable, like you said. So that's all done intentionally, and I think that was something that I was trying to do. Because I can't think of another. I'm like, what other films are like that? I'm trying to find like something out there to compare it to, and that's the first thing everyone says. Oh, what's it like? I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure what to put that in. I at some point I was saying like Human Centipede only in the sense that like people watch that movie and they have a reaction. No one's ever watched the Human Centipede and been like, oh yeah, whatever. They're either like, oh, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen, or oh my God, why did I watch that? And there's a very similar kind of thing to this as well, where it's like people are gonna go, holy shit, that was amazing and fucked up but amazing, or like, wow, why did I just watch that? And I don't think there's not a lot in between. There was one review that someone else that said, I think it was on Amazon, like there's no merit to this film. It's just a lot of death and torture and murder. And I'm like, it's a serial killer movie. What did you put this on to like go to sleep and watch it in the background? Like, I don't understand what are you looking for? This isn't an episode of Friends. Like, it's a stupid review. I'm sorry.
I saw one review is like, there's no story. And it's like, what do you mean there's no story?
Yeah, I don't understand.
Like, were you watching?
Yeah, watching a different movie, but I don't normally get too wrapped up. And the PR guy keeps sending me I learned pretty quickly. Like at least he gives me like there's like it's like it either says it's positive, mixed, or negative. I just stopped reading the negative ones or listening to the negative ones because there's by and large it's pretty positive for the most part, but the negative ones negative ones kind of piss me off. I'm just ugh.
I mean, I think on IMDb it's almost got 6 stars. So, I mean, that's 6 out of 10. That's crazy.
Yeah, it opened in Poland of all places, actually, and I was surprised. A lot of the more lower stars were Poland, and once the U.S. got involved, I think it was a little bit more. But I was surprised because I thought Poland would have a kind of a big thing. I thought they would get the film, but maybe it's too bleak for too close to home kind of thing. I don't know.
Probably.
Although Poland's what it used to be. It's got.
Now, given the response to this one, do you see yourself possibly making any spiritual successors to this movie? Since there were at least 2 other serial killers operating in the same area at the same time.
Oh, you mentioned that. Yeah. Really interesting. I think the challenge I would have, honestly, like this whole process was so exhausting. I think there's merit to that. It would be a question of, could I get someone to finance that, which is always the case. Even with Hunter's Moon, people are like, oh, you should do a prequel or sequel. It's like, okay, I get the concept, but you have to get someone to say, like, here's the money to do it. I think that would be the hardest sell is like, how do I finance it first and foremost? And does this do, this is a question I'd have to look at myself in the mirror and go, does this do what I was trying to do? And does it need another thing? Or do I take something and do my next film? Do I go adjacent to it? Or like, the film that I have in post now is more of a Stephen King, Twilight Zone kind of film, far more palatable for a mass audience, if you will. So it has, my fingerprints on it in terms of the writer director, but it's much more palatable for a broader audience. And I think there's much like an audience member after watching this, you need a palate cleanse a little bit. So if it is something I was going to do, I will say that this actress producer that reached out to me, that's a serial killer film. But it's more along the lines of like, it was pitched to me like Silence of the Lambs meets Seven. So there's kind of an edginess to it, but it's not as fly on the wall. It's a little bit more, it involves more of the detective work, whereas this was more, the narrative was focused more on the killer on this one. That one's more of a traditional, Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, Seven for all that intents purposes where you're going from the detective perspective. So I'll always kind of stay in that wheelhouse. I mean, the long-winded answer, I don't know. I mean, part of me would be interested in doing that. Part of me would think, fuck no, I don't want to, part of me is like, and also like, I don't want to get into that place sometimes, and it wouldn't be a sequel, obviously, it'd be like a pairing or something like that. But like, I don't ever want to get to a place where I have to try and top myself too, just for the sake of like, if this has been done before, how do I keep that real visceral reaction that people are having to this one? If you go and you do something else, and it's like, okay, and I know I think the other killer might have been known as the Siberian Ripper too, or something very similar.
They kind of shared the same moniker, and I think they're both
same square
rumored for. They're both looked at for a lot of the same crimes. It's a interesting pairing.
It is, and like Charles Winger and my co-writer with Hangman and I were hired at one point to do a project up in Canada. We did film in Canada. It was written. They have the Highway of Tears up there, where it's this stretch where like they think that there's like 10, like over 10, 15, like a bunch of different serial killers are all operating all at the same time, and it's mostly Indigenous women that are being killed and missing. And because they're Indigenous, the whole thing is just not as much attention is being put on it as if it was much like No Tears. It wasn't until these people that had families that people were like, oh shit, that's how they would go missing. When it was the homeless kids, no one cared, right? So like, I think there is a place, but even that one was, what's the hook? Was that was actually the studio film, was like come up with some kind of hook, and it was like, how do we sell this so it wasn't just relying on the merits of just being a serial killer film, where No Tears doesn't really have a hook. It's just, here's what it is. And so part of me as a filmmaker would be curious. That long-winded answer is, it interests me, but it also terrifies me, and also I don't know if it logistically would work in terms of getting it off the ground, I guess is the answer to that question.
Well, I'll be interested to see which direction you take. Before we end this, when does your next film come out?
We're in post now. We're almost done in post, actually. I don't have a release date. We don't even have I think we have a distributor locked in, but it's probably 95% of the way done. And I think from a creative perspective, I had that similar feeling on day 2 of filming this one, where I was like, oh shit, we got something on this one too. So for different reasons, but it was just kind of when it's working, it's working. There was energy to this project. So I don't have a release date. My guess would probably be maybe end of the year, beginning of next year. It's always like usually when a film wraps, I think in a perfect world, you're looking at like 10 weeks in post, give or take. And then it's lining up with the distributor and their deliverables. A lot of times it's like, once they've signed on for the project, then it's 3 months out. Marketing, there's so many different behind the scenes things where sometimes I'm privy to it. Sometimes I'm just like, do it and just let me know when I need to start talking about the film. So I don't have a locked in answer. I mean, right now, like I said, I'm just hoping that I'm hoping No Tears finds its audience, and I appreciate what you do and the time that you take, Paul, to push this, and the kind words that you've said about the film is great. So anybody, I'll implore anybody that watches this and listens to this and then watches the film, just hop on Amazon, put a review, word of mouth, post about it online. Just kind of, I'm always trying to look online, social media. I'm doing a little bit of like search engine stalking so that I can kind of stay in the forefront of people that are talking about the film, to just keep that narrative, because otherwise it'll just kind of go the way of the dodo bird and people won't be talking about it soon. And I hate to see that happen. So any kind of help on a small film for independent filmmakers would be appreciated. So that's my spiel.
And it definitely deserves it. And where can listeners keep up to date with you and your projects?
I'm probably most active on Instagram. So it's just my first name, Michael, and then Caissie, Caissie. I am on Facebook. I think it's just Michael Caissie. There's a few Michael Caissies, but I'm the Los Angeles one. That's probably the 2 places. I used to do Twitter, which is now X. Just couldn't take that, too much of a negative cesspool for me. I was like, maybe I'll get back on there, but I just found myself being more and more angry about
everything. Yeah.
It was just like, everyone has something negative, and I'm not even going to get into politics. It has nothing to do with that. It's just like, everyone's just so negative about everything. It's like,
everyone just goes on there to rant.
Well, it's as a filmmaker too. I think one thing that does irk me is when people are like, "Oh, this is the worst thing I've ever read, or the worst song I've ever heard, or the worst music, or worst movie." It's like, really, really, like I find that so hard to believe that you sat there, took the time to post that. It's usually what they're talking about. I'm like, get out of here. It doesn't even make sense. Even if it has nothing to do with me. I'm just like, that's the worst football player ever. Not if they're playing professional football. Clearly, that's not stupid. But yeah. So yeah, I just find so yeah. To answer your question, Instagram, Facebook, but more so, I try and interact on Instagram. If someone reaches out to me or comments, I try and be communicative because I do find that that is the point of social media, and that was one of the good things about X, or which was originally Twitter, is being able to communicate with other filmmakers was pretty cool, and actors. That's how I cast most of Hunter's Moon, was chatting with actors on Twitter and casting them that way. It was kind of a cool thing. So I do appreciate Twitter for that. But yeah, Instagram. Hit me up on Instagram and start up a conversation.
And listeners, I'll make sure those links are in the episode description. You can find me and other great podcasters over at electronicmediacollective.com. Be sure to follow me on Facebook at Moose's Monster Mash and YouTube at Moose Media Inc. Check out our sponsors, Ink Union Tattoo and Greenlight Naturals, also on Facebook. Michael, this has been fun.
It was. Thank you so much.
And probably have you back on when the next movie comes out, because I can't wait.
Love it. Yeah.
And until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.